Good morning, everyone. It's 9 a.m. and I call this meeting to order. Casey Griffin on our staff will call the roll to establish a quorum. Mr. Collins.
Here.
Mr. Darnell. Here. Mr. Eby. Here. Mr. Everett. Here. Mr. Ferguson. Here. Mr. Andrew. Here. Mr. Johnson. Here. Ms. Kim. Here. Dr. Howe. Mr. Morrow. Here. Madam Chairman. Here. I'm very much in the code. Thank you. I declare that quorum is present and we are duly reviewed. Pursuant to section 8 of policy 1.000, the board reviews policy. Workshops are used of the same policy, city as the committee of the whole. Section 1, subsection E of the same policy, in accordance with TCO 8-44-108, requires all votes taken during the electronic meetings of the board be taken by all of the vote. In accordance with this policy and the law, I move that the state board resolve itself into a committee of the whole for the purposes of conducting my workshop. Is there a second? Mr. Eby provides the second. Mr. Griffin, please call the roll. Mr. Collins.
Aye.
Mr. Darnell. Mr. Eby. Aye. Mr. Everett. Aye. Mr. Ferguson. Aye. Mr. Handy. Aye. Mr. Johnson. Aye. Ms. Kim. Ms. Morrow. Aye. Madam Chairman. Aye. Madam Chairman, we have 10 ayes. Thank you. I declare that we are the committee of the whole for the purposes of conducting our workshop. Before we move into the agenda, I do want to welcome all who are joining us today for our first in-person workshop meeting since February 2020. It's so wonderful to see everybody in person. It just does seem like an eternity. But I'm thankful that we did have the opportunity to meet via WebEx during the time that we were doing with the COVID-19. I do want to take note that we do have Mr. Gary Handy, our student rep on the board, who is with us today, and he is seeing his fellow board members for the first time. And that in and of itself is a reason to celebrate. But we have another reason to celebrate him. He graduated on Friday from Eagle High School in Rutherford County. And we are delighted that he's here. We want to congratulate him. So please join me in congratulating him. So he graduated, and that technically the meeting of this meeting was, and that does mean the governor will be appointing a student representative, but we do know that they'll be able to stay on as long as possible when we have another student representative. I also want to thank the TSBA for purchasing hosting us today. They were proud of our return to the question being great at their facility. We want to thank personally Dr. Tammy Brisson as well as being for us. We do have a lot of important presentations coming before us today, and we do have a request from a citizen, the mother of our teacher. She is this Indian Rogers who wants to address the board, and she will do that just before we adjourn. She's going to give 3 minutes to address us on materials and comments. I now call on Executive Director Dr. Sarah Nelson for your reopening remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Great to see everyone in person. Those of you that are joining us via WebEx, we've certainly all learned a lot this last year, one of which I think is how to use technology pretty semi-successfully. So that will serve us well moving forward, I'm sure. But there's nothing like being back together in person. And having missed the February meeting in 2020, I was just newly out of maternity leave. It's really good. It's been even longer. Not too much for me. I'm excited to dive into the topics on the agenda. As we all know, this has been an incredibly hard year for everyone, particularly those who are on the front lines of education across our state, and healthcare professionals, and board member there. And a number of the topics today and tomorrow continue our efforts to try to steer the ship and think about what our districts need, what our educators need, what's the state board's role in making sure that we have the resources, the policies that will support recovery, acceleration, all the things we know our students need most right now. So I'm excited for the discussions to come and just really glad we're back together. Thank you, Ben and Tammy at TSBA, especially for hosting us. As Lillian said, this will be back together, and we're grateful to them for hosting. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. A few reminders for our presenters. Please state your name for the record as well as your title. And now we'll go ahead and move into the agenda. We'll begin with a demonstration from the Oak Ridge Robotics team by first having Mr. Bob Eden, who brought this impressive team to our attention, set the stage for what we are about to witness.
Thank you, and I don't want to steal the thunder, so I'll let them describe, but let me just say that it's a real honor to introduce the Oak Ridge Wildlife from Oak Ridge, Tennessee. These students have participated in regional events, world events, and I recall one thing with the COVID, more students will get scholarships through the typical STEM activities such as wildlife than those that get maybe athletic scholarships. And so they take this thing from the beginning, they do all the business aspects of it, and I'm going to just turn it over to you and let you see what we do. Robots.
Hi, I have permission to share our screen so we can have our presentation. Can you see the logo? Can you see it now? Yep, okay.
Can we start from volume so you can know? Okay. I think it might be different if you can turn the volume down.
Hi, I'm Juliana. I'm in ninth grade and I'm our team's business lead.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm a junior and I'm a team Scrum Master. Hi everyone, I'm Amelia. I'm a junior. I'm a team.
So we are the Secret City Wildbots. We're a FIRST robotics team that runs out of Oak Ridge High School. Events around the country. So each year, we find a new robot because FIRST puts out a new challenge with different obstacles and different that requires a new robot every year. 2012, and in the past 10 years of being qualified for the World Championship 9 times. So some graphics about our team. We are a little bit over 20. We have a 100% graduation rate, and almost all of our graduates are pursuing STEM degrees and careers. 4 mentors working with our students to pass on their knowledge, and 70% of our leadership.
So you may be wondering, what is FIRST Robotics? It stands for Inspiration and Recognition of Science and Technology, and this program is from kindergarten to 12th grade. First, we start with FLL Junior.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, because we want to hear you. I'm not sure if you're close enough to your computer, your microphone, or your volume is turned down. We want to hear everything that you said, because we've been waiting to see you for a while.
We can hear Juliana very well, but the other two we can't hear, so try to get it working on.
We're going to switch computers. We'll be right back. Juliana can tell you a little bit about her team.
Are you doing anything with the moment?
While they're looking forward to trying to get their clinical difficulty, let me say that in January of each year, they from the first robotics organization will get an assignment, a robot that they have to design and build. And so they have to first raise the money, procure the parts, they get the parts come in, they build a robot from the ground zero. And then they enter these competitions, and sometimes robots, they have to shoot baskets or climb walls or whatever. I'm not sure what the design was this year. It starts in January. I think it goes to about May, and they're working 10, 12 hours back. After they go to school, they stay till 10 o'clock at midnight building these robots, putting them together and going to the competition. And it's just tremendous to see if you've never been to one of the competitions. The excitement from all the students. I mean, they have cheerleaders and people reading, and it's a very exciting thing. Juliana, can you speak more? Because we could hear you, but we couldn't hear anybody else.
Yeah, sure. So, I we're just going to join on a different computer and then we can start the presentation. But to tell you a little bit about us, so we're also involved in a lot of community outreach, and we really try hard to share our passion for robotics with the community. So I think they're back now, and then we'll be able to tell you all about it.
All right, can you hear us better? Okay.
I'm trying to find our presentation. It's here. Okay. Can you see it? Perfect. Okay, so I'm Alex.
I'm Amelia. I'm a junior and the team mechanical lead.
And I'm actually, I'm sorry, I'm in ninth grade and I'm our team.
Okay, so because you guys couldn't really hear, I'll go over this again. So we are the Secret City Wildbots. We're a FIRST robotics team, and we run from Oak Ridge High School, and we compete in events around the country. So every year, FIRST gives us a new challenge, and that has different missions and different objectives for teams to complete. So that requires a new robot every year. Our team was founded in 2012, and in the past 10 years of being a team, we've qualified for the World Championships 9 times. So some team demographics, our team is composed of over 20 students. We have a 100% graduation rate, and almost all of our graduates are currently pursuing STEM degrees and careers. We have 4 mentors working hard to sort of teach and pass on their knowledge to students, and 70% of our senior leadership team is female.
Wondering what does FIRST stand for? What is FIRST Robotics? FIRST stands for Inspiration and Recognition of Science and Technology. And it's an international robotics program made through students from kindergarten to 12th grade. We start with FOL Junior, made through grades 1 to 4. And these students are introduced to basic robotics concepts and build a simple model that completes a task. These models are less than 1 pound. Then moving into FIRST League for middle schoolers, they build a robot to complete mission models on a field and do a research project. These robots are about 4 pounds. Then it branches off into 2 different paths. You can either go to FIRST Tech Challenge, where you build a smaller robot for grades 7 through 12, which is around 40 pounds. But what we do is FIRST Robotics Competition. That's through grades 8 through 12, and we build a 150-pound robot each year.
So in making these, big robots in our competition, we learn about a lot of different skills. So for instance, in designing a robot, we use something called CAD, which is short for computer assisted design. And it's basically this 3D modeling software that's used in a lot of industries, and it lets us sketch out our robot design before we actually build it. And then once we're actually constructing a robot, we learn skills like mechanical, pneumatics, programming, and so on. But even once we have our finished robot, we still learn things like business and outreach because our team's very involved in the community, grant writing, public speaking, videography, and leadership, and so on. So we learn about way more than just robotics.
So you may be wondering, how do we run a team of 20 plus people and still build a 150-pound robot in the short time frame that we have? Well, we run our team using Agile and Scrum, and these are frameworks that startup companies use to organize their work. We write down tasks on sticky note and organize them into do, doing, and done columns so that nothing gets lost. At the beginning of each meeting, we have a group meet, and we talk about what we're going to get done for the day and what the priorities are for that week.
Each year, FIRST normally holds big in-person competitions for teams to compete, but due to COVID, things had to be a little different this year. So the challenge was virtual so that it was accessible to all teams in different conditions. So the challenge for this year was to create a robot to navigate through 5 different paths. So these paths were both teleop, which is controlled by a driver with a joystick, and autonomous, which is completely pre-programmed instructions loaded onto the robot. So our robot for this year was named Mando. It's one of the first shifting swerve drive trains in FRC. Now you're probably wondering, like, what even is a shifting swerve drive train? Essentially, a swerve drive train can move in any direction, so it can go side to side, front and back without having to rotate. And then it shifts between 2 different speeds. And this was completely designed and programmed in-house by students on our team. In a division of 29 teams, we placed second this year, and we also won the Chairman's Award in our division. Internationally, competing against thousands of FIRST teams, we placed 9th in our Hyperjet Challenge, 22nd in our Galactic Search, and 45th in our AutoNav.
To a really complicated shifting swerve drivetrain. Well, we start with design sprints. This is where we look all around in the world, from the way our dog walks up the stairs to maybe how a book falls off the table. And we come up with different mechanisms, really quick sketches that we analyze and figure out what would be the best. Once we've identified a design to pursue, we go to CAD. You can see that in the lower right-hand corner. There's a robot on the right and a hatch mechanism on the left. Once we've CAD'd our design and we can cut it out, we prototype it using masonite, which is a thick cardboard that has durability but is easy to cut and manufacture, and it's also cost effective. Once we've done a lot of different prototyping, figured out the bugs, changed them, gone back, we can machine it in more expensive but sturdier materials. We assemble it and put it on the robot, but then we notice, oh, maybe there's something wrong with this. And we keep identifying problems and making our design better because we know that nothing's ever perfect. So our design process, we start with Crazy Eights. So Crazy Eights is 8 different sketches on different mechanisms on a way that we could handle a game piece. Once we've talked about all of the different ideas, we move into detailed sketches where we can analyze different views and identify key components that make the mechanism work. Then we go into the CAD process, which leads into prototyping, machining, and rapid assembly to do rapid iteration and keep on improving.
So we also use programming for nearly all the different parts of our robot, ranging from just making it respond to what the driver commands to if we have any mechanisms for that here, like maybe a shooter or an intake or a climber. And then we also use it for making our robot drive autonomously when it isn't allowed to receive commands from the driver. And then our team also has a website. So to do all of this programming, we use 2 main languages. LabVIEW, which is the more graphical language that you see on the left, and then Python, which is the text-based language you see on the right. So in a typical year, to do all of our teams building a robot and then community outreach, we would need anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000. So to meet all of this fundraising, we basically run our team almost like a small business, where we reach out to local companies that will sponsor the team and then establish relationships with them to help meet our fundraising needs.
So we give back to our community many different ways. And one of these ways is we take all of our robotics knowledge that we learn and we share with middle school girls and teach them about computer science. We've partnered with a local nonprofit called Oak Ridge Computer Science Girls and have created 2 classes to teach middle school girls about computer science. We ran these virtually and reached over 150 girls. We've also partnered with the First Tech Challenge team to run a robotics camp over the summer. And we've run this the past 2 years and are currently getting applications for this year.
We also do a lot of outreach for other first teams in our area. One of the big things that we've done for 7 years is our annual Rookie Quick Build. We host this at the beginning of each season, and we run lots of different workshops from mechanical skills to programming skills, and these are designed to help teams learn all the skills they will need for a successful season. And at the end of these, teams actually come out with a fully functioning drive base. This has accepted over 1,900 people from 96 local teams. In addition, we also run several off-season events, such as the Secret City Invitational and Robo Rodeo, and these are competitions that aren't during the official first season that provide teams with more opportunities to use their robots and to learn and to kind of build their teams.
So we also do something called Lab in a Box, where we give free robotics kits to rural schools because we recognize that even though Oak Ridge has a lot of computer science opportunities, the surrounding areas might not have give students that opportunity. So what Lab in a Box is it's basically this big tote of robotics parts and lesson plans for teachers. So then the middle school students get hands-on experience with building a robot, getting to drive it, and then hopefully inspiration to learn more about robotics. Each kit is worth nearly $2,000, and we've already sent out 17 kits. These kits have impacted over 1,800 students, and we're planning to send out 10 more once the pandemic is over. So this is one of the coolest things about our robot. Our robot has these rainbow colored lights, and we also have this software that basically lets us draw out a path that the robot can drive in. So one day, someone had the idea that we basically take a long exposure picture of a robot going in the path, and then that lets us make these really cool pictures like the one we see here.
So we wanted to thank you guys so much for your time, and we'd now like to open up for any questions.
Thank you so much. That was incredibly impressive, and I have a million questions on my head. And I can start, and then we'll just pass the microphone to others. You said that you have 20 students that participate. Is it open for more, or is that a cap of 20, no more than 20? Or did I misunderstand that?
Yeah, so we leave our team open to anyone who wants to join it. Typically, we get like 20 members coming consistently, but we leave it open, and we want anyone who wants an opportunity to learn to be able to join our team.
Thanks for that. And then you said 70% of your leadership are women. Does that include students? You're talking about student leaders?
Yeah, so that leadership is the student leaders. So we break our team into different sections so that someone can be in charge or like be the head person for different like mechanical or business. And of those roles, 70% of them are female.
And just one last question for me. Across the nation, it's very difficult to get women interested in STEM and engineering in particular. Did you all have a campaign that your school launched to attract you to go into the robotics program and STEM in particular?
Could you repeat that, please? It kind of faded out at the end.
It has to do with the difficulty that we see across the country in attracting women to go into engineering and STEM. And so since you all have been successful in attracting so many women there at Oak Ridge High School, do you know what was the catalyst for being able to attract so many women?
So,
Yes.
first has a hashtag, and at competitions we give out lots of buttons. So one of the hashtag is First Like a Girl, and there have been first robotics off-season competitions made for only girls. So we actually have gone to those and competed. Indie Rage in Indiana, and we were finalists one year, and we won another year. So there are heavy movements to involve more girls and other diversity in first.
Thank you so much for that. Your answers are good.
Hopefully sometime we'll get to have you here when you actually see the robot working. I think a robot working, that would be exciting. But can you just describe a little bit about when you are preparing for the competition, what your day, where you go to school, and how long you'd be working, how many days a week to put this robot together?
So in a typical season from about January to March, our team would meet like every day for like 4 hours a day. It was a little bit different this year due to COVID, and we would meet like 3 times a week during a season to kind of get our robot ready.
Of the normal season, a few members that can make it work come every night, but often we have different people coming in and out on different days because we do know it's a heavy commitment. So,
and we want to leave it open for people who aren't able to come every day to just come whenever they can, but we do meet
a lot.
Other questions? Mr. Edwards.
Bob said that you could oversee one of the events. I remember going a number of years ago, and it's like a NASCAR event. It's like you can put the pageantry. It's amazing. The convention center in Knoxville, the one I saw, it required a manipulation of the ball. The precision was like massive. I mean, seriously, that's not overstated. This is what I'm saying. They're thinking there might be good, and he'll get it in a public school. It's a big deal, and I would encourage nobody, encourage any parent to really focus on this, but all the disciplines that are playing in, interact about this. And then also, schools encouraging there's a lot of folks who are volunteer, but the school doesn't have the support, volunteers. And talk about hands-on learning, it's awesome. Oak Ridge is a big city. Yeah, the high school is doing things, any public school would be very, very proud. And my congratulations to these folks, and I thank them involved for bringing them to us. It's an important message to hear. Inspiration.
Anybody else? Yes.
Okay. First of all, that was fantastic. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. My question is, what made you all be so intentional about the outward focus of your program where you are providing the box, which is opening up these sessions for people? I think it's fantastic that you're doing that. It's not like you don't remove anything, but it's about providing access to other places. So what was how did that come to be something that you all use so focused on?
Could you say that just a little bit louder? It's going in and out, and it's kind of hard to hear. Could Could you restate that question?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
That's much better.
I just want, first of all, to say congratulations. This is amazing. But my question was, what made you all be so focused on other schools providing other opportunities for doing a lab in a box, for doing those sessions for other schools to come in? I guess it's great for doing that, and the amount of time you put in, it could be just focused on winning, but instead you are doing a lot of sharing. Why was that so important to you all?
So I know at least for me, like I come from somewhere that doesn't have a lot of computer science opportunities. And like I live over an hour away in Seymour, and like my parent isn't involved in any of it. So I think our team diversity is really something that pushes us to recognize that not everyone has those opportunities, and then to reach out to our community and help share it. So at least for me, that's a big driver.
To do Lab in the Box, we have partnered with Roan State Community College, and they have a lot of different campuses all over East Tennessee. So by working with them, we've been able to see other schools that we're very fortunate that our middle schools have programs that introduce robotics to students before they even really know what they want to do. So we wanted to bring that to the rural schools so that they could introduce robotics and inspire more kids.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much.
We've had lots of microphone challenges today. I think we are definitely out of practice using microphones. Thank you once again. I don't think we have any other questions for you. You all are rock stars, and I hope you know that. And we're thankful to Bob, who is a graduate of Oak Ridge High School. We're thankful again for bringing you to us today. Again, very much.
For having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you again. We're going to move into the next agenda item, legislative and budget update.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members, Motion Jones. Let's take a look at legislative session by the numbers with 1,633 bills passed, or filed rather, 250 plus bills were passed, and the total number of bills impacting K-12 education that were filed is 378. Of those, 82 became law or are expected to become law. Some have not had the action of the government as of yet. So let's take a look first of all at your legislative bill, what priorities this became law. Public Chapter 211, Senator White and Representative Moody created this act for us. As you all know, your authority is very clear and has been very clear over licensed educators. However, because there was no provision in the law to extend that authority over probated teachers, there has been this loophole where you couldn't take action on misconduct by permanent teachers. That loophole has been fixed as of the 22nd of April, 2021. I have a presentation bill to the chair when we go on break to give you that. Another piece of legislation that passed is Senator Lundberg from Nick's district, as well as Chairman White from Larry's district. They teamed up to pass our Senate Bill 630. This bill brings clarity to the process of the some things related to textbook contracting, but mostly about the instructional materials related to the process. As you remember, the last day of the legislative session last year, in a conference committee, the process shifted so that the textbook and instructional material labels came directly to the board. This board is well familiar with the challenges we've had on that, and so this bill went to fix those bills. And it was signed by the governor on the 18th. So I'm going to touch on the administration legislation, and we do have Janet with us from the department in case there's some other questions on that. Public Chapter 134, you'll notice the sponsors for these are all the same. That's because it's customary for the majority leader or the leader of the same party as the governor to introduce and carry all legislation on behalf of the administration. So this Public Chapter 134 provides various cleanup changes. It clarifies statutory definitions and ensures consistent use of language throughout the law. This is about the proper oversight of isolation and restraint practices. Public Chapter 205 is certainly going to affect this board and all public instruction throughout the state. This clarifies that textbook and instructional materials, both primary and supplemental, used in Tennessee shall not align with Common Core state standards and explicitly prohibit the use of those textbooks and instructional materials exclusively created to align with Common Core or marketed and branded as such. That language was House language, and it is what prevailed. And it requires further that the commissioner withholds funds from non-compliant LENs should they violate that law. Sticking with administration legislation, this is the BEP, this Senate Bill 774, is the BEP hold harmless legislation. This was the #1 priority of the BEP Review Committee. It requires the LEA's calculations for the 21-22 school year be equal to those in the 2021 school year if a lower amount of funding is generated. In other words, if there was growth and you could demonstrate it, you could move up, but you couldn't move backwards in terms of that funding. Again, the #1 priority of the BEP Review Committee. A lot of work went into that by a lot of different folks, and certainly finance and administration, and the Department of Education, a lot of work over there. So Senate Bill 737, this act addresses an issue facing several achievement school district schools that are approaching the statutory 10-year expiration of the tenure, but have yet to qualify to exit priority status. Legislation creates opportunities for the ASD schools to continue serving students and communities under the leadership of their LEA of origin via a district-led intervention program, because we have seen some very effective district-led interventions, or under the jurisdiction of the Public Charter School Commission, or under the continued governance of the ASD. As of this morning, that one had not been signed yet, but it's a matter of time. There towards the end of session, the governor gets 8 ton of bills that he has to take action on. This one you certainly have heard about. And I would also argue that this K-12 Mental Health Trust Fund deals with at least a couple of the priorities of the BEP Review Committee as well. The reason I mention that is, of course, two of the board members, both our chair and vice chair, serve on the BEP Review Committee. It establishes a $250 million K-12 mental health trust fund administered by the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. I think this has a great chance to go a long way in the wake of what will certainly happen as a result of COVID-19 and the uptake that we've seen in challenges across the board on that. So, while there have been 80+ bills passed, I'm obviously not going to go through 80 bills with you today, but I am going to go through several because a lot of things affect our work, and certainly every bit of it is important to know about. Public Chapter 125 revises various provisions regarding initial educator initial educator license, educational license educator say
teachers. And that's what this teacher and looking at as we to demonstrate that the house and that is with the caveat that later so that is next year. I would turn one thing as far as what is so now you find allows you most procedure this is Senate Bill 623. You've all had a great deal of discussion about it, and I'm sure there will continue to be a great deal of discussion. This bill started out as last year's cleanup bill. It has some 56 separate provisions, but those that have garnered much attention, first of all, were the amendments that were put on in the final days of session.
Mr. Darnell, I will tell you that the issue that you have championed, that issue, which was that teachers who came out of a Tennessee EPP and then moved out of state for 5 or 10 years, taught in the other state the whole time, when they would come back to Tennessee, because of a loophole in the law, they had to go through the process of reactivating their original Tennessee teacher's license, even though they had taught the same amount as any other teacher from whatever other state. It was a problem. It's something that you've championed, and there's a provision in this bill that fixes that. The last provision of the bill is certainly what you all have seen probably the most about, and that is this discussion of critical race theory as it's known, certainly in the media. And what I'm going to do right now for the members of this board, to put it on the public record, is exactly what the provisions of this act are, so that we know what we're talking about when we're talking about this legislation. This legislation prohibits any LEA or public charter school from including or promoting the following concepts as part of a course of instruction or in a curriculum or instructional program, or allowing teachers or other employees of the LEA or public charter school to use supplemental instructional materials that include or promote the following concepts. One race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex. Number two, an individual by virtue of the individual's race or sex is inherently privileged, racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or subconsciously. Three, an individual should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment because of the individual's race or sex. Number four, an individual's moral character is determined by that individual's race or sex. Number five, an individual by the virtue of that individual's race or sex bears responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race or sex. Number six, an individual should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or another form of psychological distress solely because of the individual's race or sex. Number seven, that a meritocracy is inherently racist or sexist or designed by a particular race or sex to oppress members of another race or sex. Number eight, this state or the United States is fundamentally or irredeemably racist or sexist. Number nine, promoting or advocating the violent overthrow of the government of the United States. Number 10, promoting division between or resentment of a race, sex, religion, creed, non-violent political affiliation, social class, or other class of people. Number 11, ascribing character traits, values, morals, or ethical codes or privileges or beliefs to a race or sex or to an individual because of that individual's race or sex. This does not prohibit an LEA or public charter school from including as part of a course of instruction or in a curriculum instructional program or charter school to use supplemental that include
associated. I was curious. Board. Yeah, your question. Yeah, as well. This have been and there's so increase piece they wanted to have like what this was and other sorry. Mentioned that because
Looking at as so is that all right, so 30 wall here for find it was something here I table things like that. That's household two I don't sort of is it use those for education perhaps we would need to educate that purpose of that that I be positive is character is third point getting into because what are our roots? July, process understand what we so as you do provide high-speed broadband, we are suggesting, for every Tennessee. That's all. And have $8 billion the Board of the Committee, as every year, but this one, the number one priority was education, educator compensation. Let's look at our own state board of education budget. State Board is losing 2 positions paid for by the authorizer fee dollars to the Charter Commission. In 2020 and 21, we requested 6 new positions. There was 3 attorneys, 2 paralegals, and a communications constituent services coordinator. The governor's budget in 2020 included the legal positions, but the final budget removed them amid fears that there would be a contraction. It's been extraordinary the way the state of Tennessee has managed its fiscal shock. Collections are extraordinary and things have gone well in a time when they very well haven't gone well in many other states. So this is very much a big deal. This year, we got 2 legal positions, money for the case management software to help the legal team, which is a very big deal, long overdue. And by act of both education committees, our communications and constituent services position, after 6 years of trying to get it in, is finally paid for. So we're pretty darn happy about that. So if we look at our budget overview, our staff positions, they're here for you. You see the 14, you see our request improvements, and we got half of the positions that we had requested. But keeping in mind, people didn't know at the time that this was put together just how good the actual collections were going. Right? So there's our actual budget breakdown. You'll notice in the years past, of course, it goes from 8.7 million, 15.6 million. Why does it go down to 2,329,300? In short, because you all are out of the LEA business as of the 1st of July, and that money represents pass-through dollars to the Charter Commission. That's quite a lot there. I'm trying to get you the highlights without putting everybody to sleep. I'm happy to take questions.
Going back to the mental health bill, so where does this get implemented?
So I'm going to bring up the,
and maybe the governor hadn't acted yet, but I'm curious what, and in particular, I remember a comment a couple of years ago that our guidance counselors were spending most of their time in coordinating tests. And I'm just curious if there's enough in there to have a guidance counselor being a guidance counselor in this area as well as others without spending 80% of their time conducting the tests they're doing.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. Jack Powers with the Department of Education. So the trust fund is designed to be administered in tandem between the Department of Education and the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse. And it's $250 million in the fund, and then the interest generated off that will be used to basically pay for services that are informed by needs assessments conducted by the Department of Education. And so the way that the law is intended to work is the needs assessments will surface different needs across the state according to geographic region. And then the interest generated from that can be used to fill in for a long list of things. I mean, there's things like counseling, things like suicide prevention training. And so like whether or not that brings that solution based in the work, but
I just want to we in terms of
to students to be
So, this is, and, everyone was, you know, that was a committee, and because people, yeah, yeah, oh, but, uh, uh, what, address, budget, I don't think I missed that. No. Yeah, just you. I'll try. Okay. Any other clarity of
Also, all EPs that programs when we review the for EPs, consider standards and what the coursework is. And programs. See that here. So encourage more people to see we have a second where to increase that profession. Program and 6 days. And grant used to offer to so we stop as part of the purpose of this platform, thinking about it, then so on the that under licensed teachers to support student growth and demonstrate that. And then lastly, it would be inclusive of training in foundational literacy instruction, high quality instructional materials, and trauma-informed instructional practices. So as we started to think about this program, we really referenced existing additional endorsement programs in special education from some of our stronger EPPs. And then we've provided you with a sample document, I believe, that outlines kind of a proposed program of study that gives a little more detail to what we're thinking. So this is a sample of that program of study, 3 different content blocks, 8 courses, and then you can see the concepts that would be covered in each course, along with the field experience assessment requirements for each content block. So again, I know field experiences have been a significant part of the conversation, and so we wanted to really call out that would be an expectation of the program, and also that we would provide targeted support for praxis assessments. We know that's a really, really important piece of this as well. So that's kind of a high-level overview. I think we'd be happy to present even more depth in content during the July workshop if need be, but I'd be happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions from the Mr. Weaver?
Oh, what's that question? I want to understand, you said, I think there was $1 million grant for each district to have one special ed teacher added. If I heard that correctly, and that there were 8 districts that participated. Does that mean, was there 143 districts or something in the state? Does that mean that 135 elected not to take that, or?
I think that's accurate. I think we had 8 districts that participated in that special education add-on program. Oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke. It's 8 core regions.
Okay.
I don't have the number of districts here.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Because I was concerned that we
No, I wrote
really
that down
have
wrong. I'm looking back. It was 147 districts, 8 core regions.
Okay. Because
Sorry
I
about
was
that.
we're that short on SEAs and we're giving us grants and we only have 8 and they're not doing it. Why
Why are they not? Yeah, no.
Okay.
My apologies.
Now let's be clear about that. And then you talk about the evidence of the program impact, and one thing you mentioned was vacancy data and seeing how that would fit. Is there anything that we can do? I know we can't do it immediately, but down the road where we compare the effectiveness of these teachers who come through this program versus an EPP or some other program or something that might be there?
I think so. Certainly, we could look at pass rates on assessments and compare that. The challenge sometimes can be whether those folks actually end up in the courses for which they are endorsed to teach. That can just be kind of challenging, and you've got all kinds of different scenarios where teachers will teach X percentage of the time in this area and the other percent in a different area. So sometimes that poses some challenges. The other thing I'd say too is we expect that if approved, individuals who aren't necessarily interested in teaching those courses will also seek this option because it's free, and because we know that it'll build their skills in the classroom, whatever they may be teaching. And so that could pose some challenges for that sort of accountability as well, because we wouldn't necessarily expect one teaching.
I have a question relative to that, a chance. If determination, the this
Question.
Reconvening, our next presentation is CPE guidance to see further. Yes, ready?
I am. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Steve Quayle, I currently serve as Senior Director of College and Career Experiences at the Tennessee Department of Education in the Division of College, Career, and Technical Education. I have my colleague here with me, my right arm, for the last couple of years, Sarah Williams. And she's actually going to be doing most of this presentation today, so I'm going to turn it over to her in just a moment. Reason that she's going to be doing most of this presentation today is tomorrow is my last day of the culture. So I am moving on. I'm not going too far. I'm going over to the Department of Labor as Assistant Commissioner of Workforce Services. So I'll still be involved in this space, involved in career technical education, and working with the board from a workforce side, and with Sarah, at least in an interim role to start in this space with CTE. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Williams.
Is this okay? Well, it's nice to meet you all, to see you. I'm here for the first time. I also spent on the ceremony. I'm the current director of CTE. And I'm really excited to kind of share with you what has turned out to be my last passion, which is all things CTE. I'm going to give a bit of overview. Cool. So we're going to start out with what is CTE in Tennessee. We're organized within 16 career clusters that are nationally recognized. And within these 16 career clusters, we're really focusing on basically all occupations and from the entry level to the professional level. And throughout the coursework and the students' experience as they go through the career cluster and like that and study here currently. They really progress from that entry level to that professional level experience. And like I said, they are aligned with the U.S. Department of Education. And our overall goal is to give students the opportunity to explore a lot of occupational opportunities and to identify and start exploring and following up pathways that will lead to secondary success. So our programs of study, I'm not going to walk through each one of these 6 pieces, but within each career cluster, we're then further broken down into programs of study that more clearly define those occupations. So if you're thinking about health science, we've got a program of study around dietetics and nutrition. We've got a program of study around sport and human performance. We have a nursing program of study. So just fine-tuning that career cluster a bit more. And these are our 6 kind of benchmarks as we work on the course standards that you guys see every July. To kind of keep ourselves in check with our overall mission and being that we incorporate a challenging academic standard. It's not just the technical skills, but that there are 5 exact academic standards that we do explore the technical knowledge and skills and then opportunities for students to grow their employability skills, the soft skills. We do align our programs of study with the current needs of industries in the economy. So as we take a look every 3 years at our programs of study, we're meeting with our advisory councils, which include representing extended issues as well secondary, as well as our current teachers, to just make sure we're along with statewide needs. As mentioned before, we progress in this specifically of the course content, so that the students are really building their knowledge as they go through 3 to 4 courses within the program of study. I think it's very important. I didn't know the job that I have now existed when I was in high school. So we've got to have a lot of entry and exit points too for students to explore a lot of their interests and aptitude. And then we culminate hopefully in students leading us with some recognized post-secondary credentials so that they are more employable in the workforce or in the better staff as they transition into college. So those are kind of our benchmarks that we use anytime we're looking to add any new courses, to add a new program of study as we consider maybe retiring. And those are kind of the 6 pieces that we will always come from that too. So when we talk about what is a high quality or the ideal student experience as they progress through CTE, we're talking very heavily today about the light blue and the dark blue. So what are our programs of study? What is that student experience within the traditional classroom setting? And then what are our outcomes for helping students receive, and that being in the form of credentials. But I just want to give a little bit of voice to, those aren't the only 2 types of experiences we hope a CTE student has. And we do want them to have a work-based learning experience where they're actually partnered up with real business, either job shadowing or an apprenticeship, things like that. We really would like students to have that experience. And then also participate in an aligned CTSO so they can kind of have a competitive experience and a different way to apply their knowledge, and they get that industry feedback through the CTSOs as well. Not going to spend as much time on those 2 pieces, but just wanted to call out that they are part of our ideal experience. So these next few slides are just going to run through kind of automatically here with 3 or 4 slides, each one of our career clusters with our current programs of study included in them. So you can see we've got kind of a wide variety. Again, trying to get virtually every occupation somewhere. So we'll just let these kind of roll through here. I will say for each one of these career clusters, we have a program manager who manages. We have 2 program managers who manage 4 career clusters each. One who manages 3, and then one who manages 1. Covers across our whole division. And then transportation is our last career cluster. And so with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Steve. He's going to share with you a bit around our Perkins 5 funding, how we were funded by the state level as well as the level.
Thank you, Sarah. So as Sarah mentioned, that was kind of an overview of what career and technical education looks like in Tennessee with the different career clusters and programs we study. We're going to talk just, she mentioned that career and technical education just in general is her passion and her life's work. Perkins 5 tends to be my passion of policy, I should say, in career and technical education. It's been a passion of mine. Perkins 5 is the national or federal policy and legislation that governs our work in career and technical education. The board will remember a little over a year ago, we submitted our Perkins 5 state plan for career and technical education. These ones. There we go. We're getting the use now. Strengthening career and technical education for the 21st Century Act, otherwise known as Perkins 5, was signed into law in 2018. They went into effect last July 1st. We have in effect for 4 years, and then depending on the federal legislature, their calendar, and then they take this back up as far as reauthorization. What that looks like, we plan to be 2024 for Perkins to be reauthorized again. But as you can see, Perkins 5 reauthorized the old Perkins Career and Technical Education Act of 2006. That was supposed to be a 6-year plan, and it ended up being 12 years. So we will see kind of how long Perkins 5 lasts. But the Perkins 5 legislation, the intent is to develop more fully the academic knowledge and technical and employability skills of secondary and post-secondary students. It gives a structure for what that looks like. We have policy hands as Sarah was talking about just a moment ago, the programs are studying in career clusters. They focus on academic knowledge. They focus on building that technical skill and ensuring that students develop some of those employability skills. We did that. We structured it that way based off of the federal legislation. The Tennessee Department of Education is the eligible state agency in Tennessee responsible for implementation of Purpose 5 and the related funding. We at the department are responsible specifically for K-12 administration of Purpose. The Tennessee Board of Regents, our partners in the post-secondary world, are responsible for administration of the post-secondary level. Perkins does span K-12, post-secondary, and actually adult education as well. As I mentioned last year, we Perkins 5 4-year state plan strengthening the education in Tennessee, which was supported by this board. I appreciate the board's support last year in development and the submission of the 4-year state plan. It was approved. The U.S. Department of Education approved in April of 2020. After Governor Reed also approved that. That was a new addition in the Perkins 4 and the previous Perkins legislations. The governor did not provide those approved. So Perkins 5, that was a change, so the governor needed to approve the state plan. Went into effect on July 1, 2020, and run through June 30th of 2023. The vision here for us in Tennessee is really to expand those opportunities for all students to explore, choose, and follow our career pathways to success. How are we going to do that? The priorities here we identified through 18 months, stakeholder engagement, feedback through business and industry, and other stakeholder groups all across the state. We landed on these 3 priorities: to improve equitable access to comprehensive career exploration, advisement, leadership, and skill development through CTE pathways, expand participation in aligned career pathways, which prepare students to seamlessly transition into high-wage, high-skill, and/or in-demand occupations, and to increase the participation in high-quality learning experiences like work-based learning and the ability to attain relevant industry credentials that are needed to meet the workforce demand in Tennessee. These are the priorities of that Perkins 5 state plan, and really what kind of guide us in our work in careers and education. Annually, we receive here in Tennessee around $28 million in federal Perkins 5 funding, which is used to support CTE at the secondary and post-secondary level. I'll talk about this a little bit more in detail in just a moment, but that's split in a lot of different ways. The initial splits go kind of like this: 85% of that award, that $28 million, goes directly to secondary and post-secondary eligible recipients. These would be at the secondary level or K-12 level. Those school districts that have high school programs or high school CTE programs. 5% of the annual award is retained and is split between the Department and the Tennessee Board of Regents for administration and development. These funds are used to integrate with compliance, with the legislative requirements, to ensure that we are reporting and collecting the data that we need to report on to the federal government, and all of those different things related to the administration of the grant. And then 10% is retained and split between the Department and the Tennessee Board of Regents for state level leadership activities. These are things like our professional development conference that we provide annually, our support from parents and student organizations, the CTSOs, Sarah was mentioning earlier, different things like that. Out of the secondary pot of money, the required expenses are set aside. Those things are earmarked within Perkins, come out of this 10% that is retained out of the department. Support for state institutions. Tennessee School for the Deaf in Knoxville receives a portion of funds. Also, the Department of Children's Services receives some of the funding out of this pot of money. Support for state population students, and then also non-traditional students. In Perkins, non-traditional refers to gender specific. So males and traditionally female-dominated fields, females and traditionally male. On this next slide, and I apologize for the spider chart being a little bit hard to read here, but this breaks it down for where all of that money goes. So as I mentioned just a moment ago, it's split in a lot of different ways. If you can focus kind of on the right-hand side, the local funds, that would be about 85% that goes to those eligible recipients, the LEAs or the post-secondary institutions. 85% of that, on the bottom right, is awarded via a formula based on population and poverty information to the schools. If you look kind of right there in the middle right, the reserve, that 15%, this is a competitive-based grant. We split that between secondary, post-secondary, and then under Purpose 5, we added in that purple box, regional career pathways portion there. These are those collaborative efforts. The secondary and post-secondary are actually working together to submit to that application. You can see from the rest of this kind of where that goes. The Perkins leadership portion is also split. And the secondary, post-secondary, 85-15. The Perkins State Administration also split 85-15 between the amount that we retain the department and the amount that is sent to the JCBD. If you have additional questions on Perkins 5, happy to answer those offline. We'll talk to the specific strategies that we're focusing on them.
Steve, can you go back to the slide where you're talking about priorities, particularly the first one that speaks to affordable access? I know that's a challenge. I'm curious to know what the game is to ensure that affordable access is provided. It just runs the grant and I know is challenging, especially in the urban areas where the industries are not there. And sometimes it's just challenging for the school system itself to be able to figure it out. So what's the plan there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we did identify multiple strategies related to improving access for all students to be able to access CTE program. One specifically I refer to is on that Perkins Reserve, that competitive amount, that competitive grant amount that we award. We restructured that under Perkins 5 to prioritize those economically at risk and distressed families. This is really talking about all historically underserved populations, economically distressed, economically disadvantaged, students with disabilities. So we were very intentional in our strategies to try to focus in on those population groups. The Perkins Reserve grant is just one example. The amount that we're required to retain and use special population students, students with learning disabilities, students, English as a second language, military veterans are included as special populations. So ensuring that those students have access to those programs. COVID, for all of the negatives that were involved in the pandemic, there were a lot of positives when it came to breaking down some barriers to access for CTE virtually. Virtual CTE programs, a lot of really exciting things that are happening in that space as well.
You still employ the regional actors when they're having trying to assist these distressed families?
Absolutely. So yes, we do still support the Tennessee Pathways regional coordinators. We have 9 of those across the state. Those are ones that economic regions in Tennessee, and we are very, very heavily involved in this work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to turn it back over to you, Sarah. We'll walk through the alignment between CTE and English.
It's not to be let's see the same programming was investment in the original education they really looking at this the very rural access English bus communities with in places that was traditionally been some area and to be really those connections with these governments you know, that kind of.
And I'll add on to before we move on, that our core consultants that are within the department also help support this work for each committee. So we have a full of CPD, full consultant of our regions that work very, very closely with CPD directors and the pathway coordinators. And CPD directors to help us pathway with the district and then reaching out for the pathway regional coordinators to connect what's happening to what's outside of the school building, regularly post-secondary industry. So districts have a lot of support to help kind of navigate all of the different pieces that we're trying to accomplish because it's different for each program. What the needs are, it's different. Sometimes for each student, how they progress through, definitely different for each district. So
I think we provide, you know, because I know sometimes the smaller towns that are adjacent to the larger county, they probably, they need us to bring yes, successful and true.
absolutely. So when we were talking about the programs of study and then the career professors showed the graphic around the industry credentials. So I just want to talk about how we relate to make sure that we're not in kind of an education vacuum, but we're connected back to industry and what's happening out in the real world as we educators sometimes refer to it. So when we talk about industry credentials, there's a lot of work happening with Team Head now too, and TBR and across the board to help clarify and clearly identify what quality industry credential is. But about a year ago, we stepped back with what our current promoted lists were for industry credentials and evaluating how folks get on that list, how credentials get on that list. To make sure they align with those 6 priorities with our programs of study, that they align to the content that we're teaching, that they align to business needs. And then engaged a lot of different stakeholders, both within the department, within state agencies, as well as industry at large, to really kind of strengthen this process. So to us, as a department right now, our industry credentials, they're used to help identify the quality of CPSO versus CPD programs, both within the district and statewide. So it helps district leaders identify maybe the regional support or not pushing it to amplify the work that's happening in specific classrooms. They validate the technical skills and the competencies of the students and learners. So unlike the world of industry credentials is kind of a lot of us, there are a lot of different governing bodies, right? There's not one, but different. These are all high quality. So when we're looking at credentials, they put on our list to provide back out to students to have access to. And we really want to make sure that they're validating this way that we're actually doing in the classroom and that they're appropriate for that secondary level. And then they probably support our work around our ESSA work around having that accountability. And it's part of already graduate programs. So it counts towards industry credentials have different weights. So you can find some tiers we can back here, just like a couple of slides towards that early graduate piece. And essentially they're earning students take them. When we did our kind of relook, we previously had industry credentials tied to specific courses and we heard back and we felt that was a little too restrictive. And so now we've got our credentials to a program of study. So the students can take those when they're ready and they're not really tied to a specific course. But that they're within that program of study, they're allowed to take those and then stick with them. Even if the credential lasts for a number of years, they will stick with that student. So they don't have to continue to take it every year before you graduate. So our minimum criteria to approve or to add an industry credential is listed here. First, it's got to be aligned to one of our programs of study. It's got to be a student level credential that's got to be able to be documented in some form or fashion. And then an agreement is in place for us to know that. Coming back to the wild west theme of credentials is that it's sometimes hard to get that data from the individuals, but there's no incentive. They're not a contract with us, it's just an amendment of an agreement. So we're working with districts as a way to help kind of bridge that gap so that we can make sure that we're collecting all of the credentials that are actually earned by students and not just having to rely And when we look at our industry credential process, to connect that to with some hopeful future movement around their graduate. Every credential isn't the same. They don't carry the same like industry people well know this. OSHA 10 is a little different than a community certification. And so we created this tier process of recognize, value, and preferred. And there's growing in around industry job opportunities. So if someone's going to be considered a preferred, because you can go straight into a job for me, whereas in cases when they be considered recognized, still valuable, it's not necessarily going to impact an applicant to be chosen over another. But it's still valuable and much for students. So that's kind of how we structured the industry credential process. And where we go along and engage with industry from the local level first is part of Purpose 5 is that each district every 2 years, which I would go about, entity has to submit a comprehensive local needs assessment or CLN. And part of this is that they're required to have a panel of about 13 different stakeholders that represent parents, students, industry, post-secondary, teachers, engagement. And that local needs assessment really defines what the goals are going to be for the district in terms of using their open spending. So that relates back to the industry credentials, that relates back to making sure that our programs and courses are aligned with what's happening in Tennessee. And these are very local, with the local agencies, and we encourage, and when we're looking at labor market data, to live local first, then regional, and then statewide, because we know there are going to be some really strong pockets regionally that may not translate to statewide. And so we want to make sure that there's those opportunities first to live local with regional and us. And then every 3 years, the career clusters undergo what's called a comprehensive career cluster review. So we call it a CPR. And in that process, our program managers take a look at every course standard. They take a look at all the industry credentials, they take a look at the training, all of the pieces that touch that career cluster are and this is what generates for UIC is a lot of our course reach and our changes to our recommended changes to our programs of study, our recommended changes to our course standards. But we meet with industry and office councils as a part of that. Again, they can get that to us in that statewide view of where industries are, making sure that our standards are still aligned with what industry is moving. We do that every 3 years, as opposed to some of our academic friends who go every 6 years because of industry changes. So much more. So we want to make sure that we're at a good place. I think the one time we were doing this as an annual review, honestly, that got to the level when it came down to the educator level, because it was hard to keep up with the news. So we're kind of hitting this journey with every 3 years. The advisory council, regardless of if the career cluster is undergoing review for recommendations, there's certainly also here to give those progress and updates so that there's planning happening before again on the whole year like the career cluster is under review. So where are we with CV? Knowing all of this information, where are we? So our friends at the Department of Labor, their lead report every October. So starting with that report, we pulled out all of the occupations that were considered in demand in Tennessee. And then using our definition of high skill and high wage, there were about 20 occupations that came up, but for the sake of the slide, narrowed it down to these top and to show that we've got an aligned program of study for students to start exploring those high skill, high wage, and in-demand occupations while they're in their hospital career. So again, these are just kind of pulled out to show that we are aligned and that these are the metrics that we go to as we start looking at our career cluster programs for study and student opportunities available. So some of our data highlights is out of the full population of secondary students, about 20% of all students enrolled in a CTE course. Of that population, 45% are kind of concentrated, meaning they take 2 courses in sequence in a program of study. And then of those, 98% graduate on time. We find a lot pride in that, but our CPD concentrators are heavy graduates. And even more impressive is that 93% seamlessly transition to post-secondary, whether that be a college career, training, military. But 93% of our concentrators have success after. Super. And then we're in an agreement with UT Knoxville and do some data research for us, and just want to highlight that NTSC concentrators are more likely to enroll in college than non-concentrators by about 2 or 4 percentage points. So you can see here on the graphs go back to 2002 to 2014. Thinking about those cohorts, we are consistently much higher in our concentrators enrolling in those 2-year post-secondary experience, but the lowest the gap is getting smaller and CP concentrators enrolling in so really excited to start seeing, especially that gap in that 4-year piece for those two. But we'll also echo that we do prepare for college and career. So while we're excited to see that close, these two drugs don't capture CP, they're just straight into the So Steve's going to wrap us up with just by talking about what's coming up next from the federal level. As these things kind of roll out from the federal side, we'll have to kind of grapple and see what's best for Tennessee in relationship to these kind of changes happening from this program. So before I turn it over, any questions about what the status is with the university?
Last week I got to attend the Commissioner of Morgan County for a world heritage. See what they're doing, looking at the rural schools and the needs there. One thing they brought up was jobs for Tennessee grads program. And I guess 7 years ago, they got taken off for the data years or something. He talked about the importance of the professional skills that teachers need freshmen. Any chance that could get relooked at or?
Sure. Yeah, we're always up to review anything. Nothing ever off the table.
Review cycles, they were just, saying how important that was and something.
Yeah, we'll definitely, we're going to be programming in here for that, for sure.
Thank you for your work. Noticed that there you have agricultural engineer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious, how you're thinking about agricultural training across the state, and it's the number one revenue increase in the state. And there's a huge opportunity in the agricultural world for, it's way behind on digital applications. 10%, way 90% opportunity. So the question that I have is, what is the plan to look at how we address that opportunity as an industry? I saw one thing, but again, if you get the number one revenue producer for statewide, is there an emphasis in where is that occurring, and is it across state departments? And then finally, Andy tells me this morning that he's going to Tennessee Tech to ag economics. That's his interest, and I'm just curious how we're tying with post-secondary and thinking about that. I'll have a couple of observations and then we can answer the question. Firewall High School was started and run Bolton High School was and emphasis there. So I would really like to get a better understanding, and I don't need it all right now, of how this integrates. If we're looking at that, what are we looking at? What are we doing to look at how we train for in agriculture?
Sure. I'll answer again broad terms, and then I'll follow up with you afterwards more specific. But CPAS is the program manager for our agriculture with an agriculture. Who's that great house to both the Department of Agriculture as well as that regional. And for the last 2 years, so I've been overseeing his work. There have been improvements to our core standards to help account for some of those technology pieces. And we've had a lot of conversations with the back end of the teachers ready to teach those standards too. So that's how process is going in as well, is that as we send courses for you guys to review on first and second reading during that year, we're helping train the teachers to be ready to teach those things and to integrate in that with technology. And honestly, across all of our curriculums, there's technology with these to try to keep up with because it changes so much. But having some foundational skills, last year with the courses that will go into it this fall, there was a training staff and had to read and know and be able to work with, especially at ownership, for the various box, sale, or anything else. But integrating that in across all of the courses. So the students were doing the growth and that knowledge. And then looking at that the more refined pieces of technology that are specific to ag production, they come in as well. So there's an exposure. Students are able to operate the equipment that they can exposure emerging technologies. And when I started with what could we coming at and how can we do that so they can.
You said one kind of thing, robotics and they saw earlier in the morning where I've seen a robot that they've developed industrially that will go down a road and spray the weeds with weeds, spray them, which keeps it from flying it over and all that. So I don't know if our robotics knows it. Being aware of the agricultural applications.
Sure, it's a great opportunity. Any other questions?
I'll go through this next slide pretty quickly. I know we're a little bit behind. I want to make sure that we get to all of your questions. But Mr. Edie, if I may, on the Johnson Tennessee graduates as well. So that just a little additional context on those here is pending follow up with you afterwards. But that course is still available. Those restrictions for JTG are still available. They're part of our elected groups because they are more focused on career exploration as a whole. Whereas some of our programs of study are much more detailed and focused on a specific occupation. So that's part of the reasoning there. That's here we fall. Also, the digital agronomy, that is absolutely something that is taking off, especially in West Tennessee, but really statewide. A lot of early post-secondary opportunities popping up. Community already will, and they're doing all the programs they have with the post-secondary institutions that are inside that. So a lot is happening in that space as well around ag tech and just technology in general. National landscape. Just a couple of things here. There's a lot happening in this space. I've used this kind of analogy before, I believe, at the board, but if you can envision education being on a pendulum, the pendulum swings back and forth, and sometimes it swings away from career and technical education, other times it swings towards it. Well, I think we're currently right in the middle of an upswing towards career and technical education. I think we have been for the last couple of years. And there's some big things that are happening around this space. One that I want to make sure that the board is aware of is this without limits. It's a shared vision for the future of career and technical education. This is a national vision that came out from one of our partners that we have in the Department of Education. They're also in all 50 states and partnerships in all 50 states, representing all the state CTE directors in all 50 states. Territories and the District of Columbia. Advanced CTE developed this vision to really focus on CTE and how CTE can be used to close some of those equity gaps. I'm sure you were talking about equity earlier. This vision that is it's a national vision, really focusing on closing those those equity gaps, using CTE to do that. And really ensuring that our students have those workforce readiness skills no matter where they are, what zip code they're in, and what that looks like across county borders, across district borders, across state borders. From my experience as a local CTE director in Northeast Tennessee and Bristol, my employers in Virginia made it clear where their employees came from as long as they were staying qualified employees. So this is kind of taking that to a national lens, and want to make sure that the board is aware of that without means. So it's just come out, it's been released in the last couple of months. As Sarah mentioned early, kind of the organizational framework around the national career clusters kind of defines what our program of study look like in Tennessee. This is going to be revised over the next couple of years to make sure it's updated and in line with the way the industry looks now nationally. U.S. Department of Education is leading that revision process. It's been in place currently. The current framework has been in place for more than 20 years, so things have changed in 20 years. So trying to look at this as a framework. Again, it's just an organizational structure for us, but it is something that really connects and provides that common language between education and the industry. Just a couple other things. Yes. Question on, but what is our, we have someone there who can probably do it. Some of that thinking that you do it just a little BCT, BSB, during the yes, like that. Absolutely. So we do collect demographic data on our CT participants. Those students who participated in one CT course, as well as their CT concentrators. And it's not just gender, but also all of the special population groups that I mentioned earlier, single mothers, post-secondary world, or even our secondary world, to those individuals who have parents who are in the military, all of those things we collect that demographic information on, and what the better. How do we look at that's a great question. So, as Sarah mentioned earlier, we've got about 45% of our students who participate in CT coursework and are concentrated. That's not on par nationally with concentrated numbers. Our participation rates are actually higher than other states. So we are getting quite a few participants, but you also got to look across different states what their educational makeup is, what their structure is. So you go into Kentucky, just like many of us, they have a lot of CT centers, right? So they're not comprehensive high schools that have CT programs in high school. They bus students to their centers. So in Pennsylvania, Ohio, so some of these comparable states, their structure is set up differently. So we have a higher participation rate, about the same as far as concentrated rates. Our non-traditional participation, those students, males in traditional female-dominated fields, females in male-dominated fields, we're a little lower in Tennessee. We're still above the national average, but we're a little bit lower than where I would like to see us in Tennessee. So we have that information. That information is also, as it's federally reported, is also publicly available. And just really quickly to kind of finish this up, just some other federal policies coming down the pipe, which want to make sure that everyone is aware. One of the things nationally in the national landscape is this idea of alignment between education and workforce. A lot of opportunity and a lot of discussion around this nationally of collaboration between boards of education, state boards of education, local boards of education with workforce boards and our education boards. So I know we already have the Tennessee Higher Education Commission here, but that doesn't always happen in other states. And then there are other states where it's the kind of reverse. It's completely integrated. The workforce board and the education board when it comes to CT are completely combined. So it's just a very wide-ranging view of what this looks like state to state. But it is something that federally the policymakers are reviewing and looking at. The Higher Education Act is on the docket. Was proposed last year. We'll see if it comes back. I know that was Senator Alexander really wanted to push that one through, and it did not happen, but it's hopefully something that will. There is alignment. There are a lot of alignment around technical education in the Higher Education Act. The same thing, the National Apprenticeship Act, and the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. That one is a big one, and there's a lot of opportunity here for collaboration between CTE and then WIOA. So I just want to make sure that the board is aware of those things that are coming up on the horizon. And with that, I'm finished. I know we're over, so I apologize. I apologize for that. But any additional questions?
I want to first of all, thank you both for your passion and your enthusiasm for the work that you're doing. And Steve, as much as I do not want to see you leave, I'm happy that you're going to the Department of Labor because that's obviously going to bridge that communication and any gaps that exist. And there's a ton more work to do. I could talk about this forever, especially in my day job. Then when it's said, I'm providing what you're doing. In fact, Steve, the regulations on you to labor, the workforce, and look forward to what we said with any other comments or questions.
Thank you very much. I will be here tomorrow.
Yes, that's awesome.
Presentation as well, but, this last thing publicly, I would like to say my appreciation to the board. The last 3 years in this role, you've been extremely supportive of Prince Education, and the work that we have brought to you for a year or two. And I cannot express my gratitude. So thank you very, very much. And look forward to continue working with you.
Thank you. We wish you all the best and we'll see you tomorrow. Okay, moving on to our next agenda item, it's a review of parental students and student season. Good morning. Good morning. Chair, University of State Taylor. My name is Judy Spencer. I'm the Senior Director of Choice at the department, which means that I oversee virtual schools and charter schools, two areas that have had tremendous activity over the past year. And I'm here today to speak to you about virtual schools. We've got our agenda up here. We're going to start talking about the definitions and statutory references, go on to a discussion of where we are in our numbers, how to open a virtual school, some of the FAQs we've been receiving, briefly touch on charter schools and virtual learning, and provide some additional information and resources. And you should feel free to interrupt me anytime if you have questions during the presentation. So first I wanted to start with a definition of virtual schools. This is defined in statute, and this is word for word. It is a public school in which the school uses technology in order to deliver a significant portion of instruction to its students via the internet in a virtual or remote setting. I've highlighted a significant portion of instruction that is, again, verbatim from the statute, because that has not been defined or interpreted anywhere. And that has caused a lot of confusion right now. Does significant mean a simple majority, 60%, 75%? There's a lot of consternation about that. Virtual school statutes are contained in TCA 4.16.201 through 216. And that part is set to be repealed effective June 30, 2023, unless there is legislative action. So that's the current status. Now, on the other hand, we have virtual education programs. Virtual education program is not defined in statute. This is the guidance that we've been providing after consultation with attorneys and others. This is how we describe it. So a virtual education program we look at as a course or series of courses that are offered by a public school district or charter school via online instruction. The purpose of them is to expand or enhance the curricular offerings or to remediate students. But again, it may not constitute a significant portion of the instruction. Again, referring back to the definition of virtual schools, that significant portion. And this is described in TCA 4916-101 through 105. Not many provisions in either of these parts of 4916. There is currently on the books a state board policy 3.208 on distance learning and e-learning. That's on your agenda tomorrow for review. Item 4H. I think it was originally adopted in 2013 and apparently mostly out of date, or you all wonder more about that. But I just wanted to give you a heads up that that is on the agenda for review. Just a few more parts of the virtual education program statute that I wanted to highlight here.
102A authorizes you to promulgate rules and regulations to effectuate the purposes of the chapter. And 102B says you shall develop policies and guidelines for the operation of virtual education programs. In 105, there are a couple points I wanted to highlight here. The districts are not required to offer a virtual education program, and participation is in the discretion of the district in which the student is enrolled. It also references that students who are receiving hospital or homebound instruction shall be eligible to participate. And that's really all I'm going to speak to about virtual education programs. We're going to turn back to virtual schools. So currently existing virtual schools in Tennessee, here's the list. There are 28 of them from 25 unique districts. Robertson County has actually 3 virtual schools. Johnson County has 2 virtual schools. They both have Tennessee Connections Academy, which splits their schools between K-8 and 9-12. So to give you a little bit of context on this, in 2018-19 school year, we had 11 virtual schools that served 2,200 students. In 2019-20, we had 17 virtual schools that served 4,000 students. And in 2020-21, the current school year, we have 28 virtual schools serving 10,500 students. This slide is a little outdated since I prepared the slide. There were 15 applications for new virtual schools that are received as of May 11th. As of this morning, we have 23 total applications for new virtual schools. They are literally coming in on a daily basis from districts because our window for additional submissions is open until June 1st. So how to open a virtual school? We have, the department has a virtual school webpage, and that webpage has some basic information, including the definitions that I've reviewed today, as well as the statutory references, and then some links to documents. And one of those documents is how to open a virtual school. So the form that you use to apply for and open a virtual school is called the Program and School Authorization Form. And that is a form that a district reviews for any school opening, any school closing, the addition of a program, the addition of grade configurations, the change of address, the change of principal name. It's the same form that is used for all of those purposes, and the due date is June 1. A district superintendent would sign assurances, and then if they're applying to open a new virtual school, they complete Section A, which asks for various information about that school, and then Addendum C, which asks for supplemental materials, and I'm going to go over that in a minute. That form is submitted either by the district's school director of contact or the director of schools. It has to be submitted to our school directory team, and the deadline again is June 1. So Addendum C has additional assurances that any district applying to open a virtual school must agree to. And these particular supplemental material requirements that must accompany the application, they're tied directly to what's required in statute and state board rule. So the first one requires the excerpt from the minutes of the meeting of the local board approving the virtual school. The district cannot apply for a virtual school unless their local board has approved that. So we want to see that evidence. The second one is a plan for ensuring the access to the instructional materials and technology for the virtual school students. The third is the proposed sequential curriculum that will be implemented. We want to see that course list and make sure that it's aligning to state requirements. The fourth is the plan for providing the same length of time of learning for the virtual school students. We want to make sure they're still being instructed for 180 days and 6.5 hours a day. The fifth ties into the previous one about monitoring attendance. In the virtual setting, there are some more complicating factors, and we want to see some sort of way that they're tracking their virtual students' attendance much more than just completion of an assignment. We want to see, are your systems logged in time? Are you having check-ins? And how are you ensuring these students are actually participating? Number 6 is their plan for enrolling students and ensuring compliance with maximums. We want to make sure that that enrollment process is non-discriminatory and that they are in alignment with the class size maximum requirements. Number 7 is a plan for administering special education and English language learner services to students enrolled in the virtual school and making sure they're compliant with laws. This is one also where it's a little trickier, especially with special education services. In a virtual setting, you don't have the teacher meeting with students face-to-face in person, and that is often how children are identified as needing to be screened for special education services. So we want to know, how are you identifying the students who should be screened for special education services? Those are the kind of materials and policies that we're looking for. Number 8 is the plan for ensuring teachers are properly licensed and endorsed in the content area. And we also want to know that they're trained in delivering virtual instruction. And then the last component is the plan for administering the practice. So when we receive an application to open a virtual school, it's submitted to the school directory team, and they submit it to the division of choice. We review that submission to ensure that all the materials have been provided, that there's compliance with law and regulation, and we will seek feedback if we feel like their responses are unclear or they haven't supplied the materials, or there needs to be a modification. Now, when I say I ensure there is compliance with applicable law and regulation, I'm not conducting in-depth legal analyses, but for example, the statute requires, well, when initially open, a virtual school may have up to 1,500 students. So if I see on the application that they're planning to enroll 1,800, I'll send it back. So it's that kind of overview that we undertake. There's usually a bit of back and forth. The district applications that we've received so far have often just referred to their policies for their in-person schools. And so we want to know how they're implementing those policies in a virtual setting and the nuances of that setting. So there is quite a bit of back and forth. But once they've provided all their materials and it's clear, they've clarified anything that's unclear, they will be approved. We do not have authority to judge the quality of their program just from their application. We're just checking to make sure that they have supplied all required materials and answered all questions clearly. So that school will be authorized. The school directory team will assign that school a school number, and it will be held in pending status until July 1. On July 1, all schools in pending status are activated. So we currently have some schools, some districts who have applied for virtual schools, and we've approved them, they have a number assigned, but they're sitting in pending. July 1, that will be it. Another document that's linked on our webpage is the virtual school FAQs. We have received all sorts of questions from districts who are looking to open a virtual school, and even from those who are currently operating virtual schools, as there's been so much more focus on this area with the discontinuation of CLPs for remote learning next year. One of the questions, I'm going to highlight some of the questions and how we responded. One of them regards partnering with another district to open a virtual school. That is absolutely permitted. What we can encourage, if that helps, what we recommend is that each district create their own virtual school, open their own virtual school, and in contract with the other district for the instruction piece that they want the other school to do, the other district to do. For oversight, it is very clear that in the statute, the district itself must apply for and open, operate, and evaluate the virtual school, just like any of its other schools. The district is responsible. Also, we get questions about the principals. A principal is required, and this is not limited to virtual schools, it's in statute for all schools, if there are 9 or more teachers. And we don't distinguish between local teachers or teachers provided by a contracted vendor. If there are 9 or more teachers, then they must have a full-time supervising principal. Enrollment has been a big question that we've received various inquiries about. Criteria. Can a district impose criteria on their enrollment? That is a local decision. If they want to set a particular policy, they need to make sure that it is consistently applied and that it complies with applicable laws, such as IDEA. We get questions about when they enroll students from outside their district. They can, if that's allowed by their out-of-district enrollment policy. And again, they cannot exceed the total enrollment cap of 1,500 when they're first opening the school. There are questions about students that are partially or part-time virtual students. And this again goes back to that significant portion of instruction. We get questions about if a student is enrolled in our in-person school, zone school, and they want to take a virtual course or two, which school are they enrolled in? Well, again, it has to be the school where they are receiving the majority of their instruction, or virtual school, significant portion of instruction, but we're interpreting that as majority. Same thing if you look at the other way, a virtual school student who wants to take a course or two in person, still the majority of instruction needs to be at the virtual school, and that's the school where they would be enrolled.
Clarify, and the thing said, I believe I've heard you say, the one where they if between two districts, they're in a partnership where students from school A go to virtual school B. Would you say that school A is going to have a virtual school education, what is training?
Well, they don't have to structure it that way. There are different ways you can structure it. In a particular case we're talking about, they wanted to retain the enrollment in the data for their students in their district. So the way to do that is to have their own virtual school and contract out the instruction for the grades that they don't have to for school.
Thank you.
Sure. We've had a lot of questions about transfers of virtual school students back to their home schools. On the one case, if it's voluntary, and again, this has to comply with the district's policy on transfers. We remind districts of the accountability provisions. If somebody transfers after a majority of the year, they're still going to be deemed for accountability purposes to have been enrolled at the school where they spent the majority of their time. There's also been a question about required transfers. A district was asked if the student isn't progressing in the virtual setting, or they're below a grade below where they should be, or something like that. Can they require them to teach that? Again, yes, if that complies with that district's policy on transfers. And we always advise to consult with attorneys. And we also recommend that only be done at the end of a semester and or in the school year, since it's very disruptive to do those transfers in mid-semester. A lot of questions have arisen around participation in extracurriculars, CTE, sports, and other activities of the homeschool. There was in Tennessee an article, and I think some other articles related to that, saying that virtual school students will not participate in their homeschool activities. That's actually incorrect. They can participate if the district's policy allows it. It's a local decision. Now, there is one caveat for sports. In the case of sports, it also has to comply with the TSSAA rules. So again, we advise, talk to your attorney and make sure and set your policies and apply them consistently for all students. We've had a lot of questions around teachers, and the last two, teachers and curriculum. It's interesting because districts think that that's different in the virtual school setting when it really isn't. So teachers must be licensed and endorsed just like they are in in-person traditional schools. Also, the question has arisen, can they share a teacher between a traditional in-person school and a virtual? Yes, they can. We want to make sure, though, that they're engaging the virtual school students in a meaningful way. So the idea is not that a teacher is teaching in person in a school or class and setting up a laptop to video that presentation for virtual school students. That's not what we're after. We're looking for, yes, if this teacher teaches this period in person and the next period that teacher is handling a virtual course, that's fine. Curricular requirements are the same. They must use state-approved materials or get a waiver. That's not changed in the virtual setting. It's just a different mode of instruction. So I wanted to touch briefly on charter schools and virtual learning. We've received many questions again with the ending of remote learning for CLPs. Charter schools are prohibited by statute from running, we cannot have a cyber-based charter school. So they can still offer virtual education programs as long as that doesn't constitute a significant portion of instruction. So they can have those extra courses. but they can't be fully virtual, other than, looking at our third bullet, they are allowed to contract with a district that operates a virtual school to provide the virtual school services to the charter school students. This is allowed under statute, under the contracting rights of a charter school. But they, again, we're advising they must ensure compliance with their charter agreement as well as applicable law, and they can't cross the line so that they are considered a cyber-based charter school. And then that is posted to the charter school FAQ webpage for charter schools reference. Yes.
With the parents, out of curiosity, why is that the kids because they look into the charter school?
You know, I don't have the history and context behind that statute, so I'm sorry, I don't have that. Yeah. So we have a working group that meets weekly to address new virtual school questions, and they are coming up all the time. So I'm really happy to have this working group. We have our esteemed colleagues, Amy Owen, Angie Sanders, Jack Powers, part of it, Christy Ballard, our general counsel, and Eve Carney, the chief of district of schools, and myself gather weekly to address the latest and greatest virtual school questions. We update the FAQs on the website as a result of those meetings. I did want to let you know that we are developing a template to evaluate virtual schools, and we will commence monitoring this summer. In addition, we are hiring a full-time director of virtual schools and a full-time director of monitoring. And those folks should come on board in the next few weeks. So we're really happy to have that dedicated roles for those positions. I put down there the email, the inbox that we have for virtual schools. That's also on the virtual web page, but any questions can be sent to that inbox and we'll respond. And that's it. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions for Julie?
I just have a comment. This is very informative for me.
Brandon, you want to?
Also, just a quick comment and a thank you to Julie. She was really been working tirelessly on a topic that continues to evolve. We've had so many conversations with Judy and her team over the last few weeks. For our board, though, just to note, there's been a question about quarantining for students, live related to the rule that we passed recently about continuous learning plans and moving forward that will be used in government affairs state of emergency situations. That's part of, I think, what's driving this increase, obviously, in the charter or the virtual school applications is that districts and charters are anticipating this coming school year that they'll have some students and families who still want that virtual option. And so, the best option at this point is to open a virtual school. We are actively working with different schools. We've opened featuring students in a minute. We've talked a lot about this issue with recently with the department and other stakeholders about how we better define virtual programs so that we can think as a board about giving districts a more defined space for how that virtual program is student learning. So excited to have more conversations with this board about that. We'll have some emergency goals on that topic in July, a special public meeting and our next quarterly meeting. So we will be talking a lot more in the coming months than ever community meetings about virtual education and the role it should play moving forward coming out of this thing and all the lessons that we have. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Very informative. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you. Moving on to our next topic, I'm going to have assessor funds. Just a quick example. I thought it had Sarah queue up and introduce our next guest. I had the pleasure of spending the day, well, half a day. Colorado City Schools as part of my district, and she's a rock star, director of schools, but I'm taking Sarah's son, Thunder, from removal. I will be quick, but we are thrilled to have Katrine Stevens with us from Colorado City Schools, as Lori mentioned. As I also just recently mentioned, she has been in touch with me and with our team and Bill team over the last few months, and has been so gracious with her time, just helping us to explore some of these issues around virtual education in particular. I asked her specifically, though, today, if she would take some time to come join us about ESSER funding. Another big topic of discussion across our state and timely, given the influx of federal dollars coming in to support education efforts. I know many of you have had the chance to talk with some directors in your respective regions about how they're thinking about using those dollars, but I know I've been struck by just the incredible thoughtful way that directors like Katrina are thinking about how to use this money effectively to serve students in that area. So I thought it'd be helpful to have the first person director perspective for our board today. I'm thrilled, especially given that I think you mentioned next day school. It is. Thank you. I didn't realize that when we extended the invitation to thank you, especially for coming to be with us today, given how much attention we've done. So, and my other request, if you want to get to the end of work again, but if you want to tag on to our virtual education discussion, that was how you and I first began this conversation, and I'm still excited to have more conversations with you about your vision of the virtual education, which we really have some big ideas that we want to make sure we can support. Yes, I never approved of small ideas, that's for sure. So Dr. Morrison, Chairperson, Partners at State Board members, thank you so much for calling me today, and I look forward to spending a little bit of time with you talking about ESSER funds. And to all of us in my audience, thank you for being here. I'm really very interested in the topics that are going to be. So I provided for you a handout on ESSER 2. I want to talk just briefly. We know that we've had now 3 opportunities, and we're in the midst of the 3rd opportunity, ESSER 3. So I can't really speak about that one, except in general terms of big questions about that. But we started with CARES Act funding, and that was earlier in this year, as you know. And just to give you a frame of reference, the ESSER $2 for Tullahoma City schools, and I'm going to jot this down, totaled $3,151,299.83. That's $3,151,299.83. To give you a comparison to the dollars we received in the first CARES Act, we received $606,227.55. You see a huge difference, right, between that first allotment, which we call ESSER 1 CARES, and then ESSER 2, which is the elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund. So part of our process in looking at, remember, these are one-time use, right? Federal dollars tied to COVID-19, tied to, related to this global pandemic we've all been navigating. So it's critical when making decisions like this, and I feel very confident to speak for superintendents across our state, that you collaborate. You collaborate with various stakeholders to take a look at what are our needs, what does the data say, what are the rules of the dollars. Let me keep in mind one-time use funds, right? So those things are very important. Obviously, connected to these dollars, you must follow federal guidance. And certainly, as these dollars are allotted, what some people may not understand is those dollars just aren't awarded. So a district has to go through the process of determining how will we apply to have access to the dollars. And you know, Tennessee is a reimbursement state, which means then once you apply and go through the process, and if indeed that application is approved, you can go forward with your plan. You must spend the dollars first. You must provide appropriate documentation of expenditure that is following your plan and seek reimbursement. So it is a slow and methodical process. I think it's very important that people understand that is how it works. So going back to ESSER 2, it is $3 million. So as noted, I gathered with the leadership team within our district. So you have teacher representatives, you have school leaders, district leaders, supervisors engaged in discussing what are our needs. What do we see as ways to utilize these dollars that meet the rule, fall under the guidance that's been given, and much appreciation to our Department of Ed team members who really have done an exceptional job of providing guidance and offering webinars and phone calls and support times, office hours, to ensure that directors and their teams do things appropriately and correctly and get responses to questions, because we are all thinking out of the box. So
In the midst of this happening, Tullahoma City Schools could engage with an engineering firm to do an assessment of all 7 schools. In doing so, we discovered through this facilities assessment that we had HVAC needs. They were very significant and needed to be addressed. Clearly, this is within the rule of the one-time use dollars and would meet a need that we actually have and have documented. So as you'll look at the pie chart, you can see that 46% of those dollars, a large portion of those dollars, are going to need HVAC at 2 of our 7 campuses. Now, we have 3 other campuses that still have those needs. You can imagine that you're thinking and listening, aha, I suspect maybe in SO3, they're thinking about some HVAC needs as well, because we still have documented needs for other schools and campuses. So that took the largest bulk of our dollars. As the leadership team brainstormed, I was in communication with our school board. We have a fantastic group of 7 individuals, and Chairperson Hartgrove was able to meet Chairperson Hustleton on her visit to Tullahoma, and I know they had a great time getting to know one another. So the board also engaged in this conversation. So getting some insights and some thoughts around how we choose how to spend these dollars. You'll notice that technology took about 20% of those dollars, and you can see that dollar amount over $600,000. That was to replace end-of-life devices at all pressures for all students, 6 through 12. That's a lot of students, and they don't have devices. And so that was a strong use of those dollars to make sure we have current technology and devices for our students to access, whether they are in person or potentially virtual. And we are one of those 23 applications that Judy mentioned, seeking that virtual school option. I'm happy to talk about that following this as well. Going back to SO2, you see stipends there. Something that, as you know, as state board members and anyone recognizes this year, this has been an inordinately challenging year to every single employee of a school system. Every one of our jobs, routines, responsibilities, duties changed this year because of the pandemic. And so it was important to me, and everyone agreed, and I'm certain we've heard about this across the state, that we should acknowledge our team members with a stipend that says, we see you, we value you, we honor you, we understand you had a direct impact that created a significant amount of change and stress. And so 18.9% of these dollars went to every single employee. And employees may have earned up to a $1,000 stipend. So that gives you a feel for those dollars. Now, following that, we are now running out of money from this allotment. You can see, because 3 of those items took up a significant portion of the dollars. And we've had a little bit left, so we continue to be indebted, and we're looking at needs. So like districts across the state of Tennessee, we utilize assessments to gauge our student performance, their growth, and how they are doing overall. And what we found was a need, a clearly identified need in mathematics. So you will see that math coaches, there are 2, an elementary and middle school coach, who we added to the system through these federal and relief dollars. You will see math curriculum, math software, so you can begin to see a theme that populated. We felt that we had data that substantiated a need, and this again met the cognitive use, this learning loss. So we want to be able to substantiate how does this tie into the need. Now, you also know special legislative session. There were several laws passed, one of which related to or resulted in a law around summer learning camps, summer mini stream camps, summer bridge camps, right? And you've heard there's been funding for teachers and for materials
So that was very helpful. However, we saw a need for summer directors, individuals to oversee the work, to stand in the gap between teachers and parents, to be responsive if there is a need on site. We are offering this at 6 of our campuses, so we need someone to oversee that work. Additionally, we need nurses present in the summer. If we are going to have students on our sites, we have to be able to serve them with nurses. So you will see some items were added within these dollars, which was appropriate as it connects to learning loss, to place other positions within our schools during the summer. So that gives you a feel for how we determine how to spend these dollars. Now, there's one in there that you may have noticed. There is a virtual program director. And that too is connected to your COVID, your relief, right? You're offering these virtual opportunities. And so we believe this should be and is a space we need to enter. And we certainly need a director or principal, as Judy noted, to oversee and manage this work. So you will see that that particular person's position was put into these dollars. We're very excited about Dr. English, who will be leading and guiding this work. And I've been working very closely. That application is in prior to June 1, and we will be offering a combination of program and or virtual school for the upcoming year. So that takes you through ESSER. And to give you a feel, because you may want to know, well, what's the allotment for ESSER 3 for telehomes, right? You've got the CARES, you've got the ESSER 2. So ESSER 3, or the American Rescue Plan, is $7,077,371.76. Now, our requirement within ESSER 3 for every district, 20% of those dollars must underline in tied to learning loss. So, you know, that's about $1.5 million must be connected to learning loss. So we are in the process. We had a leadership meeting and we started discussing what are our needs, what does data say, how might we use this connected to the rule, one-time use funds to determine what we do next. So we will be welcoming students and communities and others to come in and give us feedback as we continue to shore up that plan to get that ready to apply by the August 1 deadline. Early is next time for me, so we'll certainly be ahead. Questions or comments?
Just like to make a comment. Talk about maybe analysis, even step by step, involved.
Yes.
Obviously, the teaching type of things. We know what that is. So I would like to say I think involved. You know, it's great. What we do. Have our list together and now it's specific. That these are good.
Yeah.
I think it's,
Absolutely.
we've all been through this together, so.
Yes, and oftentimes those needs from teachers bubble up. So teachers a lot of times will communicate directly to their school level leader, their principal. The principal then communicates up to the curriculum director or the director of schools. And so their voice is heard in multiple ways, which is a great process and a great thing.
Just have a couple of questions. And first, some of these areas, obviously, your director would say, what I'll get there, would be recurring costs, but it's already one time. Does that give you concern and setting that?
Yes. Yes, so it certainly does. Now, what I'll say about the virtual program, virtual school, our school board has been very clear. We're working on our 5-year strategic plan, and the virtual academy is within that. So our school board is embracing and recognizing this is a position that we are going to be picking up, future times into GP, if you will. When we look at things like math coaches, we want to evaluate. So in the 3 years, did we see with learning loss, the gaps close to a level that we believe we do not need those coaches, or we believe we do need those coaches? If so, then we need to, right, move them over down. In our SO3 discussions, when you start these discussions, by the way, if it's pie in the sky, we need this, and we need everything. Well, of course we do. We need everything. And so having a conversations where I then bring in, I see your perspective and I understand at the heart of it, for me, realize if we added 40 positions, what happens when we get to those 40 people? We say, shake your hand and say, hey, thanks so much. Oh, good luck. Right? So, and that moment of aha in that group of 29 where they realize, so we need to stay grounded, but that doesn't mean we should stop bubbling out and brainstorming the needs, but we just have to kind of ground ourselves in the reality. So, fair point and great question.
Good answer.
Oh, ding!
Secondly, with Tennessee being a reimbursement state, when you start talking about carrying across the main, $600,000 one time, but $3.7 million, the cost of money of that is just, really would take away from, how do you handle that in what you're
It
doing?
makes your heart beat quicker. I will tell you that when I signed, our faculty received the stipend dollars in the 10th. And when I signed that payroll, no, I've never signed an amount that large, and my heart was racing. But you cannot submit for reimbursement until you have evidence of payment. So, right, you gotta have your pay stubs, you have to have your account numbers, and with these dollars, by the way, there's a lot of work on your bookkeeping staff, because they have to have, in some instances, many budget codes for every single person on the payroll, right? It's a lot of work. And then we've already submitted the reimbursement, so the turnaround is quickly, and I want to honor the state, related to these dollars. We have had very responsive turnaround to get us those dollars back. I do not have any complaints about how that process has been. Now, is there anxiety? The more dollars we get, the larger it gets, because all of these districts, right, are paying and submitting reimbursements, certainly, but we're all very attentive to that. We're not challenged. That, again, to the point you raised.
One last question. Do you find your district competing with other districts for resources to, do HVAC?
100%. Yet again, he has done his homework, right? Because these are one-time use dollars. And if they connect to the rule of the funds, which HVAC is just very easy, we're talking about ventilation and air quality, right? That's easy. Well, then you have all these vendors. And then, of course, we've all been informed of the Davis-Bacon Act. Right? So we've all learned some things. And so it's all happening at the same time. Does that cause some heartburn and stress? Yes, because we're all getting after it, having to put out RFPs. And yes, we will do things. There's no doubt about that. So with that said, we have to think about contingency plans, right? What happens if we need to quite get this one done? So we don't want to lose those dollars. We got to stay within the rules. So as we're making these plans, we're also keeping over here in our pocket something that's ready to come in should that come to pass. So we're all being very intentional and wise about these decisions. And that was true. I think I'm just kidding. Yes, done his homework. I love it.
Yes, there's a parent that you and more with that. You share so much with us, and several of the board members have had discussions about this topic, and wondering how safe one would be helpful if there's any space in your world that guidance and whatever, not direction, but things that you might struggle with, because I know you all need us reference skills and stuff there. So I know you all in one and one another. We get benefits from each other. Can you share what you do on the ground with your people? And that it sounds like that is work exceedingly well.
That's fine, yes.
Yes, well, yes, and I know the bottom line grows, you said that's one more challenging. So is there any world in which you do envision others like board members who might be able to participate in your study council and listen and hear. Because I do, I listen and hear things like the upper comment about the number of what is saying and the water things like too. And we listen to the conservation of can we spend the dollars for this? We're trying to figure out if we're doing the proper guidelines and framework, but we're able to spend the money. And I know we do have the department for that kind of advice, but I'm actually stopping things without wanting.
Yes, well, you've really answered it very well. I think any of you and all of you should engage with your superintendent study councils, mid-Cumberland, upper Cumberland, South Central, et cetera, et cetera. We meet every week in South Central, and those meetings are powerful. It's very open. The discussion is honest. We're very supportive of one another. We brainstorm, we push back. It's healthy dialogue. And that's what we need. We always have someone from the department of ed there, whether it's our core, a director, or we've had Ms. McElroy, we've had Commissioner Schreiner and others there. And they listen to some of our angst and questions, and they really do help provide guidance. And sometimes have to say, well, it's a great question. Let me think about that. Let me go back and get some information to come back to you. I think you all should be engaging in that. I love that you came and visited Telehunt City Schools. And I want you to come back more and more because you being in the field at a variety of districts, getting to know directors, getting to know who you're serving is powerful, and it makes a difference in the way that you work. So you answered it yourself. Also, simply put, call every director of schools that you serve. Can I have 15 minutes every time? What's going on? What's the struggle? What's the challenge? How do you see it helping you? Make a phone call. I will talk for more than 15 minutes. I'm very to hear from you. Truly. I'm doing that. I thought you know. Okay. Any questions? And Vice Chair, you're welcome too, because you asked so many good questions. I said, well, what would you want to Would be going there. Any other questions or comments? Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and I'll come back anytime. Not even sing a song next time. Okay. I think what we'll do is first to clean up the way following these pages. I think you want to ask regularly, especially regarding the disciplinary actions regularly.
All right. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. Thanks, Tyler Madison, and the staff is coming for the board. That before you, the staff recommendations for every license discipline. To open the third time questions you may have. Or just any items for further discussion.
Any questions? Any items like you want to say? Somebody with it?
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandy. Now we're ready to call on Ms. Lillian Hodges, I'm going to earlier in the evening, that she is asked to speak to us on civil rights compliance. She is a mother, grandmother, teacher, advocate, or leader, and she has been given 3 minutes to address the board. Is Ms. Hodges with us? And second.
Ask her to speak, she's unmuted.
Can you hear me? Ms. Hodges?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. You are on now, and you can proceed to speak to us, and because you know that 3 minutes for this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I'm hearing the feedback, and I'm trying not to listen to myself. And commissioners of the board, one of my favorite comedies was the 1963 movie titled It's a Mad, 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 Mad World with Tracy Spencer. At the end of the movie, all of the characters were running around in search of the hidden treasure, which was right under their nose. Likewise, in our education system, we seek new initiatives with students, with new programs. The Regional Intervention Program headed by Melissa Sparks Finkley, coupled with 10 Voices, are hidden treasures right under our nose. Please allow me to explain. During my educational law course at the University of Memphis, students were invited to hear a great lecture, which was centered around students' discipline and students and the law in public schools. We briefly discussed preschool, and all of us gasped when we heard that in preschool, the zero tolerance had gone too far. For example, kids of color are often shut out of high-quality state preschools. Also, a state report by the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights showed that African American children receive 48% of multiple out-of-school suspensions. My only grandchild, Ariana Rose, and I sent you a picture of her, she's now 3. She lives in Smyrna, Tennessee. She was born weighing 3 pounds and spent weeks at Vanderbilt Hospital in the NICU unit. And doctors would not allow her to leave or dismiss her or discharge her until her lungs were fully developed. Recently, after being on a long waiting list in Smyrna preschool, a good preschool, a slot became available. And within a month's time, she was sent home and been put on probation. Ariana had a small speech delay in her speech, and she had changes when she could not articulate herself. And my daughter was just, again, we just in disbelief, and she said, "Mom, I've heard you over the years advocate for students and parents, but I never thought that we would actually have to deal with something like this ourselves." So that night I said, "Well, you've heard me and you've seen me. Now you have to advocate for yourself as a parent." So she wrote a letter, and that night, and the next day she heard from Melissa Sparks, who's the director for a regional intervention program, who connected her with Deanna Kimball. And I cannot say enough about 10 Voices and the RIP program. They have been jewels for my daughter and my granddaughter. Deanna, we actually went in and worked and observed the teacher with my granddaughter, Ariana. It was like a dissertation she presented. And she had detailed information and we found out, no offense is not degrading anyone. It really wasn't my granddaughter. It was just the teachers were lacking skills to handle her. And she's doing extremely well now. And as I was reading the dissertation, I would say that Deanna wrote, I was thinking, wow, this would be great for our elementary schools and our middle schools. This program, if it can be extended, and I know that we have guidance counselors, but if we could just somehow not necessarily remove the guidance counselors, but just have this program available to our public school system, it would help tremendously. I know I'm sorry, I know my time is up, but I just want to really be an advocate for the Tennessee Voices and this program and make sure that parents are aware of this program. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate your input. Before we adjourn, I do want to take it on as always to thank all of our presenters for their hard work and their due diligence. These reviews would not be as effective as they are if we didn't have you and the hard work that you do. And you serving with us over the past year and the work that we do as board members. Are there any closing comments or questions from you before we move? Not hearing none. The purposes of the committee of the whole have been fulfilled, therefore I declare the from the board adjourned. Thank you.